All right, hello, and welcome back to the Broken Business Models podcast. We're your hosts, Ryan and James. And before we get into today's podcast, just a quick disclaimer: nothing in this podcast or any of our other materials should be taken as investment advice. James and I could have positions in any of the stocks we may mention today, and we reserve the right to change those positions at any time, with or without notice. So make sure to always do your own work and consult with a professional before making any investment decision. With that being said, today we're doing an update on PureCycle Technologies. They just released their first quarter 2025 earnings release, and so now it's a good time to see what they have to say for the most recent quarter. For those of you who may need a little bit of a refresher on what PureCycle is, PureCycle is the company that has the technology to take recycled material, recycled plastic material, and they have this technology that can use that feedstock to create um, what they call almost virgin quality plastic material that can be used for things like food safe containers. It has a clear consistency, so it has a lot of these pure properties that regular traditional recycling technologies would not be able to produce. The problem is that this is a very difficult technology to operationalize, and over the past several years, PureCycle has been unable to ramp up production and sell their material for any appreciable amount of revenue. And this has led them to burn cash quarter over quarter. And as we've said in our previous videos, they appear to be reaching the end game and rapidly heading towards bankruptcy. So they, as I mentioned before, they just released their first quarter 2025 earnings results. And so because they're so close, they appear to be so close to the end of the line. It's very interesting to see what they had to say for their current situation. So with that, I'll kick it over to you, James.
All right. So in the first quarter of 2025, PureCycle generated revenue for the first time ever. And so they generated $1.6 million in the quarter, which is, pretty small, pretty minuscule, but at least it's something. Now, as we explained, you can look at, we made many videos about PureCycle in the past. As we explained in previous videos, I'll give a quick Spark Notes version here. PureCycle's original plan was that they would create recycled polypropylene, that's the name of the plastic, that is so good and so pure that it is indistinguishable from virgin polypropylene. And they would sell this, recycled polypropylene to end customers. In last year, in 2024, they announced that they had completely changed their strategy. And instead of selling pure 100% recycled polypropylene, they're going to do something called compounding. And the compounding is you get the recycled polypropylene and then you mix it with virgin polypropylene to get this hybrid, compounded thing. Now, we believe that the reason that they had to resort to this compounding is because their recycled product is not 100% pure. It is not virgin quality and cannot be used on its own. Therefore, the only way that they're actually able to make it usable to the end customer is to mix it with virgin polypropylene. Now, of this, $1.6 million of revenue they generated, they sold their compounded product, their compounded, recycled virgin hybrid product to fiber companies. And these fiber companies would use this plastic to make things like fabric and rugs, things of that nature. Now, PureCycle did not disclose the pricing, of this $1.6 million of revenue they generated. They did not disclose the pricing per pound of the plastic that they sold in the quarter. So we know that they made $1.6 million of revenue. We don't know how many pounds of plastic they sold, so we don't know the price per pound. Now, in the conference call, the CEO was asked about, to give some commentary about the pricing. He gave what I thought was a very vague and evasive answer. So he reiterated their prior guidance that they would sell, their recycled polypropylene for $1.36 per pound. However, to me, this comes across as completely nonsensical and not credible. The reason being, this $1.36 guidance that they just reiterated, they originally made that guidance a couple of years ago, back before they had unveiled the compounding strategy. So that $1.36 was supposed to be for pure 100% recycled polypropylene. Well, what they just sold is not that. It is a hybrid compounded product. So it's a completely different product than what they were originally intending. So if it's a completely different product, it doesn't make sense that the pricing is going to be the same. So I view that as, completely they're reiterating the guidance. I don't believe it at all. And he also made some vague statements saying like, oh, we're going to try to switch to a feedstock plus pricing model, but it's all very vague, and I don't take it very seriously. Now, so basically all we know now is they did sell, some amount of this compounded product to fiber customers, customers that use it to make fabric and rugs and whatnot. And it's a compounded product, and we do not yet know the pricing of it. And if we don't know the pricing, we don't know what the economics are going to be for PureCycle. Now, as I just explained, the original plan was that they would sell the recycled polypropylene, just by itself. And then last year they said, "Oh, we actually are changing the business strategy. We are instead going to sell the compounded product." Now, in their Q1 presentation, they're now saying that they're going to do both. So they're going to have two different product lines. They're going to have what they call Pure 5 Ultra, and the Pure 5 Ultra is going to be 100% recycled polypropylene. Basically, what their original plan was, just sell the recycled polypropylene on its own. So this Pure 5 Ultra is just a pure commodity, just pure recycled polypropylene that is supposedly virgin quality. In addition, they're going to sell the Pure 5 Choice, and the Pure 5 Choice is the compounded product, and this is going to be done on a custom orders. So a customer, once based on whatever end product they're trying to make, they're going to have specific specifications for the plastic. What percentage recycled, what percentage virgin, and whatever other specifications they need. So when you have a custom product like Pure 5 Choice, well, the sales cycle is going to be a lot longer, and the production process is going to be a lot longer. That's just the nature of it, right? For any product, a custom product is going to take longer to produce and to sell than a commodity product. So the Pure 5 Ultra is the commodity, the Pure 5 Choice is the custom compounded product. Now, this kind of begs the question of, if the Pure 5 Ultra is really virgin quality, why not just sell that? Why do you even have to do the compounding at all? Now, PureCycle claims that the compounding is an additional service that they provide to the customer. And this will ultimately provide more favorable economics, because PureCycle, by doing this compounding, they're adding more value in the they're taking more of the value chain, they're adding more value to the customer, so they ultimately will be able to generate more revenue. So that's what they're saying now. However, I don't believe that at all. I think this is all BS, and I will explain why in the next slide. So firstly, last year, I think it was in the Q2 2024 conference call, PureCycle themselves admitted that to get to ratable sales, they had to do compounding. When they use the term ratable, that really means significant. So they themselves said that to get to significant sales volume, they had to do compounding. That implies that they could not get to significant sales selling the Pure 5 Ultra. So they themselves admitted that they're having trouble selling the Pure 5 Ultra, so that's why they have to resort to compounding, to try to make it easier to sell. But if the Pure 5 Ultra is really virgin quality, it should be very easy to sell. It's a commodity. It's easy to sell. But they're saying they can't sell it. They have to do the compounding. Well, that makes me believe that the Pure 5 Ultra is not virgin quality, and customers are not willing to buy it because it's not high enough quality. So that's the first red flag. The second red flag is, the whole narrative that PureCycle is going to add more value, take more of the value chain with the compounding, and realize better economics. This makes absolutely no sense, because PureCycle has no expertise in compounding. Remember, compounding was not part of the original plan. The original plan was just to sell the Pure 5 Ultra on its own. They only started talking about compounding last year. So they have no expertise in compounding. Not only do they have no expertise in compounding, they're not even doing the compounding themselves. They're outsourcing it to third-party compounders. So PureCycle, they create the Pure 5 Ultra, then they pay a third-party compounder to mix it with, virgin polypropylene to make the compounded product, and then they sell that compounded end product to the customer. So they also say that their prospective customers that they're talking to, the ones who are currently just using virgin polypropylene, they are used to buying pure virgin. The customers are used to buying pure, uncompounded virgin polypropylene, and then they compound it themselves and then use it to make their products. So the normal sales in the virgin world, the normal sales process is, the consumer products manufacturer, they just buy pure polypropylene and compound it themselves. That's the normal way of doing things. Now, if it were really the case that you could achieve this, you could achieve better economics and create more value by the plastic producer compounding it themselves, why do the virgin polypropylene producers not do that as well? It's only PureCycle. PureCycle is the only plastic manufacturer that is deciding to do the compounding themselves and is not deciding to sell the Pure 5 Ultra on its own. Well, the only reason I can think of that is because the Pure 5 Ultra is not virgin quality and customers are not willing to buy it. It's not workable because the Pure 5 Ultra, the recycled plastic, is not 100% pure. It cannot be used on its own. So the only way that a customer can use it is by mixing it with virgin polypropylene as, a compounded hybrid. And that's why they to date have only sold the Pure 5 Choice and have not sold any of the Pure 5 Ultra. Now let's talk about production. So this chart on the left shows their feed rates achieved each quarter, and they in the first quarter of 2025, they achieved a maximum feed rate utilization of 12,500 pounds of feed rate per hour. And they said that is 87% of their utilization. So they said they were able to run their facility at 87% of nameplate capacity. So they're almost at full nameplate capacity. However, that is just for 1 hour at a time. So if you look at their best, the best hour in the entire quarter, that best hour was 87% of nameplate capacity. They did not achieve 87% of nameplate capacity throughout the entire quarter. In fact, in the first quarter, they only produced 4.3 million pounds of recycled polypropylene, which is only 16% of their supposed nameplate capacity. So they have achieved, high rates of utilization for very short periods of time, but they only do that for short bursts. If we look at the entirety of the quarter, their production is still very, very low. So why is the production so low? PureCycle claims that they could, if they wanted to, run the facility at a much higher rate of utilization, right? So in the first quarter, it was only 16%. They said if they wanted to, they technically could have produced way more recycled plastic than they actually did. The reason why they kept production so low is because they are holding back production while they await customer orders for the compounded product, right? So the Pure 5 Choice, as I explained earlier, this is, a custom product. Each individual customer is going to want different specifications, different percentages of, recycled versus virgin. So this obviously takes a long time. And they said, okay, as we're, going through this whole customization process and the sales cycle, because we're waiting till all of that is complete before we actually ramp up production. However, so that makes sense for the Pure 5 Choice. But what about the Pure 5 Ultra? The Pure 5 Ultra is a pure commodity, just 100% polypropylene. There's no customization. It's just a commodity. Now, if you were just to make the Pure 5 Ultra, you wouldn't have to deal with, all these long sales cycles, and you could run the plant at, full capacity today. Make the Pure 5 Ultra. It's a commodity. It would be very easy and very fast to sell. And they claim, according to their previous guidance, that they would be able to sell their Pure 5 Ultra for $1.36 per pound. If that were really true, they would be able to generate massive contribution profits today by selling the Pure 5 Ultra and not even worrying about the compounding. So it basically doesn't make sense. Why would you, if it were really possible for you to make the Pure 5 Ultra and sell it at a huge profit today, why would you underutilize your facility to try to wait to make the Pure 5 choice? So this also leads me to believe that, the Pure 5 Ultra is not virgin quality. Nobody's willing to buy it. And that's why they're not making it, right? That's why they're not running their facility at full utilization. Now let's talk about the liquidity situation. So at the end of 2024, they had $32 million of cash on hand. And I'm including both their unrestricted cash plus the current portion of their restricted cash in that number. In the first quarter, they burned negative $54 million of negative free cash flow. They issued $16 million worth of bonds, and they also issued $33 million worth of new equity. And, all things together. So they had the $32 million, they burned cash, but then they also raised new capital. They ended the first quarter with $28 million of cash. And that includes both unrestricted cash and the current portion of restricted cash. In April, they issued $27 million worth of bonds. It was actually $30 million worth of bonds, but it was sold at, they were issued at a discount. So PureCycle's net proceeds was only $27 million. Now, also in May, they had to pay $12 million for a legal settlement. We actually talked about that in our previous video, but the legal settlement was agreed in the first quarter, but it was not finalized by the judge until May, which is in the second quarter. So in the second quarter, they're going to have to pay $12 million for this legal settlement. This legal settlement was based on a shareholder lawsuit that was accusing the company of lying to investors during their SPAC process. Now, how much cash are they going to burn in the second quarter? Well, they burned $54 million in the first quarter, but that also included some CapEx. Given their desperate liquidity situation, maybe they can reduce their CapEx, and their cash burn might be maybe $40 million. That's just a guesstimate. So if we add all those together, they started off with $28 million at the end of the first quarter. They got $27 million from the issuance of bonds, minus $12 million from the legal settlement, minus $40 million of cash burn. And they're on track to end the second quarter with almost no cash. So they are very likely going to need to raise capital within the next quarter or so. Probably in the third quarter, they're going to have to raise additional capital. Now, they do have a $200 million revolving credit facility from a related party, but that carries with it a usurious interest rate of 17.5%. So that would be very bad if they have to draw on that. But the point we're making here is that the liquidity situation is desperate, and they are obliged to raise additional capital, both in the form of debt and equity. Now, given how desperate the liquidity situation is, you would expect them to try to be generating revenue and contribution profit as quickly as possible. And if it were really true that they could produce this Pure 5 Ultra that is virgin quality and is a commodity, if it were really true that they were able to make this and it is indeed virgin quality, they would be able to generate massive revenue and contribution profit today, which they are not. And so that leads me to believe that this Pure 5 Ultra is actually not virgin quality, and that's why nobody's willing to buy it. So yeah, wrapping up, it is true that PureCycle has generated revenue for the first time ever, which is an improvement, but it's a tiny amount of revenue, and we don't know the economics of it. And if we look at previous examples of companies that have tried to make, a sustainable product using recycled materials and then sell that for a premium, it usually doesn't work out. Consumers mostly don't actually care whether or not the product is recycled. Most consumers don't actually care about the environment or the planet, at least not when they have to spend real money. And a perfect example of this is a company called Allbirds. They make shoes. They try to use sustainable materials, including recycled materials. And because they use these recycled materials and sustainable materials that are much more expensive, the Allbirds shoes are much more expensive than other comparable shoes from different brands. And the idea, the idea was that consumers would be willing to pay the high prices because of the sustainability of it. Now, as it turns out, Allbirds has been a complete failure of a business and is on the brink of bankruptcy because it turns out most consumers don't actually care about the environment. Now, PureCycle, according to their guidance, their pricing guidance, they say that they are planning to sell their recycled polypropylene for $1.36 per pound. The price of virgin polypropylene is about 60 cents per pound. So PureCycle is planning to sell, is claiming that they're going to sell their recycled polypropylene for more than double the price of virgin. So the entire, bull case rests on the fact that consumers are going to be willing to pay double the price for a recycled product. And I am highly doubtful that this will actually be the case. And it's a moot point anyway, because for all the reasons we discussed, earlier, I don't think they can even make, I don't think that they can even make a recycled polypropylene that is of virgin quality. So the technology doesn't even work anyway. They can't even make the product. But even if they could, I am very doubtful that they could sell it, for such a massive premium price as they think. So that about wraps it up for everything we had to talk about PureCycle today. If you have any opinions or thoughts about PureCycle, please let us know in the comments section below. And make sure to stay subscribed because, going forward, we will continue to cover PureCycle as well as, many other companies. So with that being said, we will log out and see you on next week's video.